Welcome to a great day of learning, fourth graders. Today's lesson will focus on comparing decimals. The standard is 4.NF.7 and it states, compare two decimals to the hundreds by reasoning about their size. Recognize that comparisons are valid only when the two decimals refer to the same whole. Record the results of the comparisons with the symbols greater than, equal to, or less than, and justify the conclusions by using a visual model. And when they say a visual model, they're meaning you can use a tenth and a hundredth grid. If you shade them in, you can compare decimals. You can also use a number line. Draw a number line, partition it evenly, label your number line, and you can definitely use a number line to compare your decimals. All right, so let's just get a little clarification of our symbols. We have our greater than symbol, we have the less than symbol, and we have the equal to. I think about the symbols, or I remember them as the open-ended is going to always point to the larger number. I think about like an alligator mouth. Alligator mouth can be very wide. And guess what? It's going to eat the biggest of whatever it can eat. Same thing with our comparing symbols. The greater than symbol, this open end is going to always point to the larger number, the larger decimal, or the larger fraction. When it comes to the less than symbol, we have this little small point that's going to always point to the smallest fraction, the smallest decimal, or the smallest number. Now, before I told you can use visual models to help you compare decimals. I stated that you can use tenth and hundred grids. You can also use number lines. You can also use place value to help you compare decimals. So let's look at these two decimals that we have. We have 12 and 4/10, and we have 12 and 39/100. Now, if we look at it, we can use place value to help us compare these two decimals. Always start with the number or the digits the farthest to the left. So let's look at these digits. It's in a tens place. Both of our decimals has a 1. So if it has the same number, it's really no need to compare. We can just move over to the right to the next place value. In the ones place, both of our decimals has a 2. There's nothing to compare here, so let's move over to the 10th place. We have a 4 and we have a 3. We know that 4 is what? Exactly, 4 is greater than 3. So that lets us know that 12 and 4/10 is greater than 12 and 39/100. Another way that we could look at this decimal is 12 and 40/100, because we could put a little zero back here for a placeholder, and we already know that 40 is greater than 39. So that will help us also when it comes to comparing decimals by using place value. All right, so let's look at our lesson for today. The word problem states, most bumblebees are about 7/500th of an inch long. A common hornet is about 1/8 of an inch long. Which insect is longer? All right, so let's look at what they have for us. They gave us some visual models. We have the hundredth grid. The reason it's called the hundredth grid because it has 100 small little bitty squares. That's the reason we call it the hundredth grid. We also have the 10th grid. It's partitioned into 10 equal parts. That's the reason we call it the 10th grid. So if you shade 75 of these little small squares, and on here for the 10th grid, if you only shade 8 of your columns, let's see which one of these models have the most space shaded. And as you can see, 1/8 has the most space shaded, right? So that lets us know that 7/500th is less than 1/8. Also, if we chose to use a place value chart or to use our place value, it says, notice that 8/10, which what we have right here, has a 0 in the hundreds place in the chart. So they put our decimals in a chart. We have 7,500, and this was 8/10, right? But they just added a 0 to make it 8,000. Remember that 8/10 is equal or equivalent to 8,000. So it says compare the ones. The digits are the same. Both of them have zeros. Compare the 10th. You have a 7 and you have an 8 in the 10th place. We know that 8 is greater than 7. So that lets us know that 8/10 is greater than 7,500. All right, let's answer some questions about it. It says, write fractions equivalent to 7,500 and 8/10. So let's see, we want to write some fractions that's equivalent. So if you're writing 7,500, but we want to write a fraction that's equivalent to 7,500. So I'm going to go ahead and write the decimal 7,500 equals, now let's write it as a fraction. 75. I'm going to draw my fraction bar. Up under my fraction bar, I'm going to write 100. Now for 8/10, let's write the decimal 8/10. And let's write the fraction that is equivalent to. We're going to write an 8 for the numerator and the 10 for the denominator. It says, how can you compare fractions with denominators of 10 and 100? Well, the way that we can do this is we will want to make this fraction, the one that has a 10 for the denominator, we want to make it equivalent to a fraction with a denominator of 100. And the way you would do that is you will write the fraction 8/10 and you will multiply it by a whole fraction. And the whole fraction that we will multiply by will be 10/10. And I'm pretty sure you're saying, well, Miss Kendall, why are we multiplying by 10/10? The reason you're multiplying by 10/10 is because 10 times 10 is equal to what? You got it? It's 100. Because we're trying to make our denominator 100. So we know that we can multiply 10 times 10 to get 100. Draw your fraction bar. And whatever you do at the bottom, you have to do it at the top. Whatever you do at the top, you have to do it at the bottom. So we multiply 10 times 10, which means we have to multiply 8 times 10. And 8 times 10 is, good job, 80. So this is how you will compare fractions that has a denominator of 110. What fraction with a denominator of 100 is equivalent to 8/10? As you can see over here to the right side, I've already did that for you when I multiplied by a whole fraction, 10/10. So that lets us know that 10/10, once we multiply by 8/10, it will give us an equivalent fraction. So we know that 8/10 is equivalent to 80/100. So on my line, I'm going to go ahead and write 80/100 for my answer. Now it says compare the fractions. Then compare 7,500 and 8/10 using greater than, less than, or equal to. All right, so let's go ahead and compare our fractions real quick. So the fractions that we're comparing is 7,500 and we're comparing it to 8,000. because we just made it to equivalent fraction, right? Just so it'd be easier to compare. We know that 75 is less than 100. I'm sorry, 75 is less than 80. So that lets us know that 7,500 is less than 8,000. They also want us to compare the decimals using our comparing symbols. So let's write our decimal, 7,500. Make the decimal a little bit bigger. And then our fraction, 8/10. Sorry, I wrote that backwards. We already know that 7,500 is less than 8/10. Okay, let's move on. All right, let's do a little activity together. We got to do some little true or false. It says, tell whether each statement is true or false. Let's look at A. 5/10 is less than 6/10 because 5/10 is less than 6/10. Okay, that makes sense to me because if you think about it, 5/10 is less than 6/10 because if you use a grid, you're only going to shade 5 of those rows and then 6. And we already know that 5 is less than 6. So guess what? This answer choice A is true. Let's go ahead and put an X in true in that box. 2,500 is greater than 3/10 because 25 is greater than 3. Okay, that is true. 25 is greater than 3. However, we're talking about decimals, so it doesn't really go that way. So let's go ahead and write those decimals on the side real quick. So this is going to be 2,500. And then this is going to be 3/10. And remember earlier I showed you in the little chart, the place value chart, they put a 0 on the back end just for a little placeholder. So now this will make it a little bit easier to compare our decimals. 2,500 is less than 3,000. So this is false. B is false. We don't want B. Let's look at C. 8,900 is greater than 8/10 because, all right, let's look at the fraction form. 8,900 is greater than 8,000, which is so true because on the previous lesson, remember I just showed you that 8/10 is actually equivalent to 8,000. So that is correct. 8,900 is greater than 8,000. So we're just going to mark true. Let's look at D. 600 is equal to 6/10 because 6 is equal to 6. That is true. 6 is equal to 6. However, when it comes to decimals and comparing them, this is actually not correct because 600, let's write it as a fraction. Maybe we can see it a little bit better as we write it as a fraction. 600, and let's compare that to 6/10. But that fraction has a different denominator, so let's make it equivalent real quick. Remember, when we make it equivalent, you just want to multiply by a whole fraction, which is 10/10. So whenever you're converting your denominators from 10 to 100, you're going to always multiply by 10/10. 6 times 10 is 60. And of course, 10 times 10 is 100. So now both our denominators are the same. So let's go ahead and compare it real quick. So we have 600 and we have 6,000. So let's go back and see, was that statement true or was it false? So it says that 600 is equal to 6,000. And as we can see, that is definitely not correct because 6 is less than 60. So the correct answer will be 600th is less